Hello class, hello professor. Today I'm giving a presentation about the story of Isaac, specifically about the offering of himself, and why is that important, or is that just something cruel and that God asked of Abraham? It's a tough subject, and but I'm very glad that I could study it and share it with you today. My presentation is a voiceover, so we have images and you hear my voice speak. Thank you. The story of the offering of Isaac is difficult to understand, especially for the modern mind. Here in this picture, we find Abraham, the father of faith, holding his son Isaac, ready to kill him as a sacrifice. Fortunately, an angel comes and stops Abraham. A ram is offered in Isaac's place. We see the ram on the bottom right under the angel. It's easy to pick on this story to show how God is barbaric, but actually, when analyzing the story from different perspectives, in contrasting the story between the Quran and the Bible, we find in Isaac a model and someone relatable in many ways. The story of Isaac is contrasted with the story of Ishmael and Hagar, a chapter before in Genesis 21. Sarah, wife of Abraham, offers Hagar, Sarah's Egyptian maid, to Abraham so that Hagar can bear Abraham a son in her stead. Unfortunately, from the moment Hagar is pregnant, Sarah becomes jealous. Ishmael is eventually born. However, once Sarah bears her own son Isaac, she decides for selfish reasons to ban Hagar and Ishmael. This picture depicts the pitiful situation Hagar is left in. She has no more water to give her son Ishmael, and so decides to abandon him under the shade of a tree. I cannot bear to see my son die in front of my eyes, she says. However, as she leaves her boy, an angel comes, as we see here, and tells her about a nearby well. The angel encourages her to survive, and she does. In both stories, angels act as rescuers. They rescue both Isaac and Ishmael. And from my readings of the Bible, the Quran, and Sun Myung Moon's speeches, I don't think God is barbaric. God is simply put in a difficult situation. In the Quran, it reads, O my son, I see in vision that I offer thee in sacrifice now. See what is thy view. The son said, O my father, do as thou art commanded. Thou wilt find me, if Allah so wills, one practicing patience and constancy. Surah 37.102. We find here that a vision came to Abraham. In this version of the story, we don't know if the idea comes from God directly. Additionally, Abraham tells his son beforehand about this vision. Together, both the father and the son willingly agree to pursue the vision. It is important to note that in the Quran, the son being referred to here is Ishmael, not Isaac. From this perspective, this story is now changing to not being about a cruel father doing something crazy to a son, but the story turns into a son wanting to be at level with his father's desire. This story is not as barbaric as it seems. We are slowly coming to find, in fact, that this is a story of deep appreciation and love between a son and his father and God. Along these lines, doing a deep dive into the personalities of both Ishmael and Isaac, and we find that both have a profound trust in God and their father. Even in the Bible we read, and God was with the lad, and he, Ishmael, grew up. He lived in the wilderness and became an expert with the bow. We need to understand that being an expert with the bow did not simply mean he was a good hunter. The etymology of the word sin comes to mean missing the mark. In other words, Ishmael, as a man good with the bow, likely meant he seldom missed the mark. He seldom sinned. He was good. We see in this picture Ishmael with the arrows behind his back. We've established now that both Isaac and Ishmael are model sons. They understand their father's pressure of following God's command. They both want to unite with their father Abraham. Why is it so important, though, to go through such a dramatic scene? How does God feel about all this? Why was the threat of death needed? Sun Myung Moon gives context to the enormity of the situation God was in. He, Abraham, did not have any relatives there. He did not have any friends. Even then, he had to be responsible for the heart encompassing all the misfortunes of humanity, taking responsibility for the whole history of restoration. We need to understand the unfortunate life of Abraham, who had to overcome everything with the mindset that no matter what kind of misfortune, tribulation, sorrow, difficulty, and pain came his way, he would fulfill the will of God. He did not know that he had to resolve not just the misfortune of that time, but also the misfortune of the future. The future is the key point here. God needs a lineage from which a Messiah can come. From this perspective, Abraham, whether he is conscious of it or not, bears the load of what is to come. The future depends on how much Abraham is able to restore in his lifetime. Abraham has immense pressure. That's why Abraham was so desperate, even willing to offer his son to make amends for his mistakes. He is the starting point. In his old age, he needed his son and grandson to finally lay out the foundation for the Messiah. This, the divine principle explains. Well, none of this would have been possible if not for Isaac or Ishmael's unity with Abraham. You see, God does not have any children at his side at that time. Abraham had the chance to bring children to God, even if it meant sacrificing his own. This is why God was able to bless Abraham. So in conclusion, what I see there's Abraham's family, but also God, who also wants to relate directly with his children again and wants his own family. So I see Abraham's offering of Isaac and Isaac's offering of himself to be for a greater purpose than their own family, because they're bringing back themselves to God. And I think this is something that we miss in just a regular reading of the Bible, that God too is looking to relate to us. And it feels weird maybe that Isaac has to kill himself physically for that. But in the end, we know that Isaac does not die. Isaac is saved by the heavens. And so, yet, the mission is a success. The foundation of faith, as the divine principle puts it, is laid. Isaac does his job, Abraham does his job, and both are alive. But there's this need of willing to sacrifice it all, especially at that time in the providence of restoration, when nothing was laid. God had lost Adam and Eve and had not gained back his kids yet. So I think to understand this well, we can read Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who in his book The Cost of Discipleship mentions about this story. He puts a Christian flavor to it, but I would like to read a quote from the book. And at that very moment, so he's talking about the very moment when Abraham is about to slay his son, all that Abraham had surrendered was given back to him. He receives back his son. God shows him a better sacrifice, which will take the place of Isaac. The tables are completely turned. Abraham receives Isaac back, but henceforth he will have his son in quite a new way. This is important. He receives Isaac in a new way. Since he had shown himself ready to obey God literally, he is now allowed to possess Isaac, though he had him not. Dietrich Bonhoeffer here takes the position that perhaps Abraham didn't really own his son. They weren't really united. But once they both offered themselves to God's purpose, God's providence, which was so important at that time, Abraham and Isaac became, he says, allowed to possess Isaac, to possess him through God. Now God was in their relationship. Isaac received the blessing that Abraham received. Isaac inherited it and can continue the promise that Abraham made to God. No one else knows what has happened. So, right, we have the servants at the bottom of the mountain. But Abraham comes down from the mountain with Isaac, just as he went up, but the whole situation has changed. God has stepped between father and son. God could come. And so I'm sure, although it may seem extreme, of an extreme story, in the end, God is able to come into the family of Abraham and Isaac. And so we can kind of appreciate this sacrifice. And we make this sacrifice all the time. We sacrifice ourselves for the future. As Sung Myung Moon is putting it, there's the future. The sacrificing for the future has immense pressure. What we do in a moment has ripple effects into down the road. So I think all in all, we should just simply appreciate Isaac, appreciate Ishmael for who they were, for people who really were willing to give their lives for their father, because their father was the one who was talking with God. And themselves, maybe we don't know if they had a direct relationship with God, but they followed their father. And because of that, they too God could come in between father and son. And you could have this really great unity. And from there, we see the results. We had a lineage established. A foundation of Messiah could be started, and Jesus could come, and then a true father could come. So I really appreciate Isaac and what he did. Maybe some people, I remember in one of my classes at McGill University, my professor was saying maybe this is blind faith and maybe naive, but in a way being courageous is foolish. Just like Abraham, he went out of his hometown. God called him out when he was old. Abraham was old when he got out of his hometown. It's foolish in a way, because just like today, imagine starting a business after you're 60 or something like that. It sounds a bit foolish. You don't really know what you're doing. But Abraham is not just foolish, but he's courageous. Isaac is not just foolish, but he's courageous. And the blessing he gets is that God comes into his family. And from that, God can work to bring about the original man, Jesus, and start again. And we have the result today. So, yep, that's my sharing. Hopefully it can be helpful. Thank you very much.